trying to get through this.
Easy to listen. I was able to do it.
Easy to dance.
I'm not a great lover of cats. That's my fear.
You're a disgrace, you are.
Not me. That's my fear.
You're a disgrace, you are.
Hello and welcome back to One-on-One Shadowboxing. We continue our discussion with Dr. Mark Endrich, and the topic is sustainability and energy and water. So Mark, what is happening with water in the future? We got lots of water in the ocean. What can we do with that water, or how can we have that into use? If we need, because the ocean, for not just for Perth but for the whole world, has got lots of water, and all the rain is coming from the ocean anyway.
That's right.
So how can we use the ocean more effectively in the water sustainability?
Well, right now we're using the ocean for about half of the water use in Western Australia or around Perth with the desalination plants. Also further north and also around the world, desalination is very popular, especially in the Middle Eastern countries, or it's one of the only ways to get fresh water. The issue with it is it takes a large amount of energy. So one area that's been trialled right now is combining wave energy with desalination.
Because that's very handy at the oceans.
That's
we
right.
got the waves and we got the water.
You've got the waves and you've got the water. So, for example, for an island, or even for a place like Perth, having that combination is very handy. The issue is the scale and how much water you can produce. In terms of having that sort of scale that we need for the 7 or 9 billion, I forget now, the population keeps going up so quickly, that the people on the planet. The ocean is a large source of water already. And then, of course, you mentioned the rainfall as well, and the rainfall that comes off the water, off the ocean. To produce the energy required for the desalination, that still comes from fossil fuels mostly. So I think that the future of water production in desert or areas which are desert and which also have a high population is to combine renewable energy. So that would be, for example, concentrated solar power, which we haven't talked about.
What is that? How is that different from the solar power? Concentrated solar power, what does it mean?
So concentrated solar power is effectively where you have large mirrors or dishes and they reflect the sunlight onto one point, their foci. And then you have salts, which are inside a container or inside a pipe, and what you do is you melt the salt to at about 400 degrees from the sunlight, and then you can store that. And so that is what's called concentrated solar power with storage, and that's been used in Spain and it's been used in the US, in Arizona, in the west coast of the US. And that's probably...
That's an industrial use or industrial use?
Industrial and also sold to residential power use as well. So what that allows is you've got large-scale solar power with storage, and you can get 8 to 10 hours worth of storage overnight, which allows you to power...
The governments prefer to privatize the water, the energy, of course, the electricity and the gas. And that's not really always good for sustainability. Do you know how much of the energy supply in WA is in private and how much is in government hands?
Well, if you talk about the energy supply itself, it's almost all in private hands. So
The supply.
So, and in fact, 90% of the energy that is supplied in Western Australia isn't actually used in Western Australia. It's mostly used in the processing into liquid natural gas and then shipping that to Japan, Korea and China, where it's used over there. So in terms of the energy supply side, it's almost all multinational companies. and in terms of the demand, it's also international companies as well. So we actually, as residents here, don't see 80 or 90% of the energy. We don't get to use it. We don't get to touch it. It's
Just
it's
disappears.
exported. Yes.
And if we got that much of energy, why don't we pay less in Western Australia for the energy?
So that's to do with the negotiations. From what I could understand from it, is that the reservation policy, where there's 10% of the gas which is kept for Western Australia or for West Australian use, that's reserved. It's not necessarily put into the market. So it's not put into, 10% is not just of gas, for example, is not just put into the gas pipeline, which would reduce prices. 10% is being reserved for that, and we're having to move to global, or not global, sorry, because LNG is actually, or liquid natural gas, is actually costly to transport. We're paying Japanese prices for our gas in Western Australia. Because of private companies, it's in their interest to sell it at the higher price, obviously. The same thing looks like it's going to be happening in New South Wales and Queensland as well.
So we are big suppliers with the resource hub for that, for the world, and we still have to suffer to pay the same as they have to pay, just taking it away from us because it's all in international, multinational companies' hands. So how can this happen in a real Western democracy? Everything is sold and sold out, I mean, and the people have to pay high prices. Something is not right in here. Or just that's the world.
Well, I think we've really moved into almost a corporate feudal system. I think that the world it's no longer, or it's I'm not sure if it ever was, but in terms of there used to be the feudal system where you had the lord who owned the land, who was appointed by the king, and now you have a corporate feudal system. There are renewable energy offerings as well. So, for example, there's wind farms that are being started, which are privately owned or owned by companies, they're not government owned. Getting access to the grid, however, has become an issue. So actually, the infrastructure itself, which is owned by the government, that needs to be built up in order to take all of these other different energy sources. There's a real advantage to having everything government owned in the sense that there's economies of scale. There's also better planning.
Yes.
And you can also control your costs through the buying power. That's not really the direction which everything has been headed in, though, and that's because you can make more money if it's privatised.
But then the government is kiss goodbye for the extra tax, which is probably not very good for them.
Yes, and recently the federal government was making noises about changing the tax structure of the state-owned companies. So, for example, the Water Corporation, Verve Energy, so that they get the amount of money that they would have got from the tax rebate if they sell. So right now they don't actually pay corporate tax, even though they're called corporations, because they're state-owned. They get to retain the taxes that they would have paid.
And water, how the water supply is owned? Who is owning the water supply in Australia or in WA?
Yeah, so in WA, the water supply is entirely owned by the Western Australian government through the Water Corporation. There are several suppliers, and there actually is starting to become some more independent suppliers as well. Not to the retail level, but into the Water Corporation itself. Yes. For example, Harvey Water can supply water to the Water Corporation. The Water Corporation will buy it. And then the Department of Water controls how much groundwater the Water Corporation gets access to.
And how did they calculate how much water you can get access to? What is the base of calculation? It's interesting to know.
I don't know the base of calculation. It's probably related to how much they had the previous year. That would be.
It's a follow-up. It's a follow-up, yes.
But yes, but I don't know if there's. I don't actually know how that works exactly, but it would be taking into account whatever work they can do in terms of the environmental need, and then there's the reality of the reduction in rainfall that we've had as well. So, the dams are almost liabilities now. They're not actually assets. They're not, except for we actually put the desalinated water into the dams, and then that feeds the Perth water supply. But the dams, apart from that, are pretty close to being useless.
Except until we get the rain back.
Until we get the rain back, that's right. Until we do some reforestation, or until we can figure out this global climate change problem, and then we end up with returning our rainfall to some more historical levels.
In this program today, we not touched base with the sustainability of the finances for the households. What's your message for the households in finance, in financial terms?
Sure, I think the message is, firstly, to lobby for the state, or to talk to politicians about increasing the sovereign wealth fund size, or the percentage of royalties that are put towards that, because that's going to help future generations to save some of the non-renewable resources that we're currently selling. And then the second thing is, if we can all save more than we earn, and also have some entrepreneurial spirit, then let's go for that too. So they're probably my two main messages.
The people, I think, understand and welcoming the message, but how can you utilize these logical things, what you just said, when you are living in an era when the income is recycling and designed to recycle? So people in Australia are really living on credit. It's dropping a little bit, and people are put money into the bank to spare money, but the recycle of the wages is an old age problem.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, certainly there's been an encouragement to spend. I mean, if you look at the messages that we get, which obviously the messages from the retailers, but also the messages from the government, it's to spend to help the economy. But I think that's a short-term fix. I think we need to look more at the long term. Typically, we should be looking at 20, 50, 100-year plans rather than our short-term Western focuses.
To end this program, I say thank you for your visit, and I hope the people will understand the future is probably more important for us than our present, and we have to live our life at present to ensure our future. Thanks again, Mark, and please come back next week, one-on-one shadowboxing, same time, same channel.